This video is sponsored by Card Kingdom. If you click on the link in the description below, it'll take you to their store and they'll know I sent you there. Hello everyone, I'm Nitahone, and it is Wednesday, so that means it's time for another MTG Top 10. This is a series where I rank cards based on how well they've performed at Magic's highest competitive level. This time around, we're looking at a converted mana cost. I plan on getting around to all of them at some point. So far, I've looked at 0, 8, and 9, and today we're looking at 7. In looking at 8 and 9, we saw a lot of cards that people almost never cast normally, because that's just a ton of mana. However, throughout the game's history, 7 has been an amount of mana that is attainable for ramp or control decks. While we will certainly see a few reanimation targets and such on this list, they don't make up the majority of it. 7 mana is a lot, and generally if you're paying that much, the card you're getting out of it is super powerful, so get ready to see some power on this list. Before we get started, a quick reminder on how I score cards in these videos. A Players Tour, Pro Tour, or Mythic Championship top 8 is worth 2 points, as are Legacy and Vintage Championship top 8s. A Grand Prix or Magic Fest top 8 is worth 1 point. Now, let's get to number 10. At number 10, it's Phyrexian Colossus. The Colossus is from Magic's Days Gone By, where a 7-mana 8/8 that was difficult to block had to come with a downside or it would be too good. Creatures have gotten a lot more powerful over the years, and you can bet that these days, if the Colossus was printed, even without the downside, it would not make a huge impact in competitive Magic, but context is important. In its day, the Colossus was an evasive threat that could hit incredibly hard, and all for only 7 mana. That wasn't something that was common at the time. Untapping it for 8 life might sound pretty steep, but the decks that ran the Colossus generally had ways of getting around that problem. In all formats, the decks it was featured in also ran Voltaic Key, which could untap your Colossus for you and help you produce stupid amounts of mana alongside mana rocks, which could allow you to get the Colossus out earlier. Most decks to feature the Colossus also ran Tinker, which could also get the big guy into play for a discount. Voltaic Key decks running the Colossus as a win condition were so dominant in block that after managing 5 top 8s at Pro Tour New York in 1999, the Key got banned from the format entirely, which meant the Colossus wasn't able to put up any more points in that format. The Key remained legal in Standard and Extended though, where the Colossus found some more success. Phyrexian Colossus is barely hanging on to its spot in this list right now, with Platinum Angel only 1 point behind it. It will be interesting to see how much longer it can hold on, but given the fact that the Colossus hasn't been played since 2003, it seems like something will be passing it in the near future. At number 9, it's Elesh Norn, which is one of the best reanimation targets in the entire game. Elesh Norn gives a huge boost to your team and deals a huge blow to your opponent's team. This combination is often enough to swing a game wildly in your favor. The one downside is that Elesh Norn costs 7 mana, but hey, you definitely get your mana's worth out of this card. That said, people almost never actually pay for Elesh Norn, instead cheating it into play in various ways. In Standard and Modern, there was Burial Rites, and in Legacy and Vintage, there's Sneak Attack and Show and Tell, and a wide variety of powerful reanimation spells that have been used to bring back Elesh Norn. Elesh Norn is going to continue to accumulate points going forward. At number 8, it is Hogak, Arisen Necropolis, a rather infamous card from Magic's recent past. Hogak has a pretty cool design, but also one that should have given R&D playtesters a few red flags. It has 2 abilities that help reduce the cost of the card between Convoke and Delve, and the latter ability has proven to be busted on numerous occasions in the past. But hey, in Modern Horizons they wanted to have fun with designing super strong cards that could make an immediate impact on Modern, so I guess they succeeded there. Except that Hogak ended up being completely insane. It's way too easy to rapidly load the graveyard in Modern thanks to things like the dredge mechanic, and this led to Hogak coming down insanely early, like on turn 2, with regularity. Hogak was only legal in Modern for 2 months before getting banned, but put up 18 points in that short span. Being banned out of Modern doesn't mean the end of Hogak though. He has found success in Legacy Dredge decks too, where he's really good, but the rest of the format is powerful enough that he doesn't seem like he is in imminent danger of getting banned or anything. He's going to continue to put up points in Legacy going forward. At number 7, it's Dragon Lord Atarka. There's a cycle of legendary Dragon Lords and Dragons of Tarkir, and they are all pretty sweet, but Dragon Lord Atarka has the highest mana cost of them all at 7, but she probably should cost that much because she has a huge impact on the board right away. Dividing 5 damage among all of your opponent's stuff usually lets you come out ahead in terms of cards. Other times she can just do all 5 to your opponent, potentially allowing her 8 power on the following turn to be enough to kill your opponent outright. So, yeah, these days, if you are legitimately paying 7 mana for something, it needs to have an immediate impact on the board, and Atarka definitely does that. Sure, it hurts a little if your opponent kills her right away, but her powerful Enter the Battlefield trigger does make sure that it isn't a total loss. While in Standard, Dragonlord Atarka was mostly played in ramp decks, where she was the main thing decks were trying to ramp into. This included Devotion decks running Nykthos, as well as more traditional ramp decks. Recently, Dragonlord Atarka has picked up her first points in Modern, showing up as a singleton copy in the sideboard of a Scapeshift deck. At its heart, Scapeshift decks are ramp decks, and siding in something like Dragonlord Atarka gives the deck a way to win that doesn't rely on the Scapeshift combo. She may very well gain some more points in Modern, or maybe even Pioneer, in the future. At number 6, it's Hornet Queen, which, like Atarka, makes sure to make an impact on the board right away, in this case by making a bunch of 1/1 flying Death Touch creatures, and that's some serious value because those creature tokens can either really pressure your opponent's life total or be used to trade for anything, thanks to Death Touch. While in Standard, she was played in Whip of Erebos reanimation decks where she fit in perfectly. The Whip only lets you reanimate a creature for a turn, but that's fine in this case, thanks to those creature tokens that she leaves behind. Like Dragonlord Atarka, she was also played in Devotion ramp decks. Hornet Queen also has some points in Modern where she's been featured in the sideboard of Amulet Titan decks. Those decks use Amulet of Vigor to produce a ton of mana with bounce lands, and normally their plan is to use that mana to quickly cast Primeval Titan, but Hornet Queen can be brought in from the sideboard against more aggressive decks, where you need to make sure you get your shields up before you'll be able to pull off a quick kill with the Titan. She provides so many Death Touch bodies that any creature-based deck has a difficult time finding a way through the horde of insects. Even though the deck only runs a singleton copy, it also runs Summoner's Pact, allowing you to search up the Queen against decks where she's really needed. She doesn't have any points in 2020 yet, but it really is only a matter of time. At number 5, it's All Is Dust, a powerful board sweeper that makes everyone sacrifice any colored permanents people might have. This obviously means most non-land permanents, but the decks that tend to run All Is Dust are usually capable of making this effect pretty one-sided. It didn't find much success in Block or Standard, but Tron decks in Modern started making use of the card in 2013. Tron decks are capable of producing tons of colorless mana in a hurry, and also primarily run colorless permanents, so they are capable of casting All Is Dust early, and not losing much they control in the process. Over the years, Tron decks have evolved into more Eldrazi-centric decks, which also run Eldrazi Temple, and formerly Eye of Ugin before it was banned, but Eldrazi Temple makes it even easier for them to cast All Is Dust thanks to its tribal card type. Eldrazi aggro decks and Legacy also run All Is Dust, and it seems likely that All Is Dust is going to continue to add to its score in both formats. At number 4, it's Angel of Serenity. Throughout the list, I've been talking about how a good 7-mana creature needs to have an immediate impact on the board. It can't just be a pile of keywords and stats. Angel of Serenity definitely has an immediate impact on the board, immediately exiling 3 creatures that are in play, and she can actually go after graveyards too. While players will get the card back if the Angel dies, Angel of Serenity's effect is a lot better than most Oblivion Ring type effects in this respect. Because the creatures don't come back into play right away, your opponent will have to cast them all over again, and that's some serious tempo. This means that she will mess up the board even if your opponent kills her. You will sometimes see players exile their own stuff with her too, especially from the graveyard, as this will give you a safety net of sorts if your opponent kills it, because you'll get a card back in your hand in the worst case. Obviously, she also has flying and stats that quickly pressure your opponent. She was one of the most powerful cards in all of Return to Ravnica block, as evidenced by the fact that she appeared in 4 of the top 8 decks at the Block Pro Tour, all of which were control decks. In Standard, she was also featured in control decks, but she was also played in Reanimator decks, which sought to cheat her into play early with Unburial Rites. The Angel has never found success in non-rotating formats, and it doesn't seem super likely she will anytime soon. She's too clunky to cast regularly in those formats, and there are just better things to cheat into play for Reanimator decks in those formats. At number 3, it's Worldbreaker, an Eldrazi. For 7 mana, you get a 5/7 who, of course, immediately impacts the board. In this case, by exiling a key artifact, enchantment, or land. Your opponent is basically guaranteed to always have a land, so he'll always be doing something. Worldbreaker also has some resilience, as it can keep coming back from the graveyard if you have the resources. While in Standard, he was played in ramp decks alongside Dragonlord Atarka. In Modern, Worldbreaker was featured in some versions of the busted Eldrazi Winter deck, which existed while Eye of Ugin was legal in the format. The Worldbreaker was particularly good in mirrors, since whoever could cast theirs first could exile one of the key Eldrazi lands featured in the deck. Since the banning of the Eye, Worldbreaker has transitioned into Eldrazi Tron decks where, once again, he's at his best in the mirror because of exiling key non-basic lands. On top of that, there are plenty of artifacts and enchantments to exile in Modern too. Worldbreaker also has 2 points in Vintage, where it's played in some Eldrazi aggro decks. Worldbreaker is going to be sticking around on this list as it continues to amass points at a decent pace, but it has a little ways to go before it can catch the number 2 card on this list, which is Gurmag Angler. Like Hogak, the Angler comes with Delve, which makes it pretty easy to turn the Angler into a 1-mana 5/5. The Angler may not do anything immediately upon hitting the table like most of the 7-drops on this list, but since you are usually paying nowhere near 7 mana, just having a stupid efficient creature is good enough, especially in formats that have no problem loading up the graveyard. In Standard though, decks couldn't do that quickly enough, so the Angler has no points there. But in Modern and Legacy, it has seen some significant play. In Modern, it is played in decks like Death Shadow and Hollow One, both of which already have a game plan that involves throwing stuff in the graveyard. In Legacy, it's mostly played in Grixis Delver decks, which, again, like loading up the graveyard. And at number 1, probably not surprising anybody, is Karn Liberated. This 7-mana Planeswalker has a huge effect on the game since he can immediately exile cards from the battlefield or your opponent's hand. He also has one of the wackiest ultimates around since he restarts the game, while giving you a significant head start, since you get to keep the cards that Karn has exiled. In Standard, he was played in control decks, but he didn't have the most impressive showing there, largely because the format didn't have any good ways to ramp mana. Karn has thrived in Modern though, pretty much from the beginning of the format. This is because 7 colorless mana is the magic number for Tron decks, which can produce that mana on turn 3 with regularity. If you've never played Modern and faced down a turn 3 Karn Liberated, consider yourself lucky, because it is not a very easy thing to come back from. Karn has a firm grasp on the number 1 spot in this list, and that's not going to be changing anytime soon as he continues to put up points and extend his lead. Well, that does it for this MTG Top 10. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it and share it so that others can enjoy it too. If you want to make sure you catch future MTG Top 10s, don't forget to subscribe. And if you want to make sure you're all caught up on the over 250 of these, you should see the playlist on your screen now. Thanks for watching.